Yeah, there's a problem with well, it can be either mirrored here or mirrored on YouTube. No, it's kind of, it's weird.
It's coming.
All right, should we start with the Heart Sutra?
Yeah.
What do you reckon? To the Arya triple gem, that's not here at one time.
Great community of monks.
Sat down and was absorbed in concentration, called profound perception. Also, that time, perfection of wisdom.
And beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, to the parable Buddha, the venerable Self-Cherishing said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the venerable Shariputra.
Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage, practices the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon like this correctly, holding those five aggregates also as empty inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, composition, factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness without characteristics, unceased, stainless, not without stains, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no composition of factors, no consciousness, no eye, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon.
There is no
I element and so on up to including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on up to including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. There is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, without obscuration, without fear, having passed to reach the end point of Nirvana. All the Buddhas dwell in the three times, also manifestly, completely awakened to the unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on perfection of wisdom. Therefore, mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of the great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the truth and is not false. Of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in profound perfection of wisdom like that. And the Bhagavan arose from that concentration, commended Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that, it is like that. To practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you've indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding, along with the words of Suras and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and humbly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam La Chanchu Badu Dani Kyap Suchi Dagi Zangi Betsonang Rola Penchi Sangye Dopas Sangye Chodan Soki Chonam Chanchu Badu Dani Kyap Suchi Dagi Zangi Betsonang. And once in English, I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the highest ascent from the accumulations that I collect by listening to the teachings. May I attain the state of the Buddha to be able to benefit all sentient beings. Yeah, we managed to squeeze in one in English. Yeah. All right. Hi. So, I I thought of doing a couple of things today. One of them, maybe let's start with at least one of the secondary offenses, so that we'll at least get at least one done this week. Maybe we'll do some more tomorrow if we manage to do it. So I thought of doing that. Then to review what we have covered today and yesterday with Geshe. And also I thought of, if we have time left, I also wanted to introduce the way that Lama Tsongkhapa speaks about maintaining the mind of enlightenment, because here in chapter number 4, we're looking at developing conscientiousness with respect to the with respect to bodhicitta and with respect to the training. And we said that the whole point in speaking about it is that once we've developed bodhicitta, we want to maintain it to prevent it from declining. And then later on, we also want to increase it. So Lama Tsongkhapa also spoke about it extensively in his Lamrim Chemo. And it's interesting kind of when you compare these two presentations, what Shantideva is saying here and what Lama Tsongkhapa says in his Lamrim Chemo. It seems that, just roughly speaking, Shantideva speaks of developing conscientiousness from the viewpoint of what you need to rid yourself of. So he says that you need to abandon wrongdoings. That's the first point. And then you need to be conscientious about the cultivation of virtue. But also the way that he explains that, he says that if you don't cultivate virtue, that will teach me to have nuts before the session. Yeah. Well, the first lesson that I learned in my first time translating here at Chenrezig Institute was not to have chippies before a session. That was not, or while the session. So Geshe Jamming and myself came to Chenrezig Institute, and we had, like, I think the following day, a tea party that the library people put together, or maybe the visitor, the liaison people put together. So there was like lamingtons, terrible. Then chippies and stuff. So I started having chippies, and then I had to translate, and I was choking all along. So that was my first lesson. Anyway, so it seems that also in the section of being conscientious about cultivating virtue, Shantideva says, if you don't do that and you end up in a miserable state of existence, it'd be hard to dig yourself out of this situation. So it's also like, it says you need to cultivate virtue, but it presents that in rather saying that if you don't do that, that would be the end result. You'll end up in a miserable state of existence. So Lama Tsongkhapa says that, but he kind of also gives a lot of details about what you need to do on the positive side, right? So it's not only you need to avoid negativities, you need to purify negativities. He also says, well, basically you need to be mindful of bodhicitta 6 times a day. You need to not abandon sentient beings. You need to be diligent in doing this and that. So I thought of kind of this, putting those two presentations together gives us a better idea of how we become conscientious with respect to bodhicitta, so that it is not abandoned in this life and it is not abandoned in future lifetimes, right? So first of all, we begin with making sure that in this life we sustain bodhicitta. But then Lama Tsongkhapa gives a really nice explanation of what you need to do in order to make sure that in future lifetimes you continue with the work, so that bodhicitta is not abandoned also in future lifetimes. So
Volume 1 or Volume 2?
Volume 2, page 69. Well, if you have it on your device, then it's instructions on maintaining bodhicitta. I think that, let's look at the title of the chapter. Maintaining the Spirit of Enlightenment, chapter number 6 in volume number 2. Yeah, they call it the Spirit of Enlightenment.
And the other thing that I would like to contribute,
Please do.
is that yesterday you were saying that Lama Zopa's long life prayer, you were called to view as moral way to service the bountiful bearer of law.
Yeah.
Well, I've thought of a few examples of how he is the bountiful bearer of law.
Mm.
You want to hear that?
Yeah.
Is that what, for example?
I mean, it'd be awkward now to say, no, actually, no, I don't want to hear about it. No, I'm just joking.
Of course, and I know you are just sitting on the edge of your cushion waiting for me.
No, please do, please. I was just joking.
No, you are sitting on the edge of your cushion, aren't
Yeah, totally. I'm kind of, my hands are shaking.
Well, like, for example, one example is, in the emails which we get from FPFT, he's currently funding somebody to write, I should know.
Personal current, Serene.
Yes, in gold, 1,000 verses in gold, and I think this is he wants to go for the second time round, because so there's always somebody within FPMT. So, anybody who FPMT is developed, we're all accumulating merit.
Yeah.
Pure gold.
Yeah, pure gold.
Yes.
So, and another example is the way that he totally established the Sangha feeding, Sangha food fund for Sarah J. Like, we are all going to accumulate merit for that forever and a day, as long as Sarah J. is around. And, also, for example, he's got those little glass things with prajna, with the yes, thank you, Chuck, with the Padmasambhava on it, that there's heaps of them around. Any water you put that into becomes blessed and causes people to speak in a more positive way. And they're just three things that just. So
no, I totally agree with that. When I came here to Chinrezig Institute, that was my first time working inside an FPMT center. I was connected with FPMT through different teachers before, but I was always on the outskirts, never on the inside.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of be totally exposed and informed about what Lama Zopa does when you're on the outside, but when you're inside and over the time you get to see the scope of the activities, then it's pretty mind-blowing, particularly considering how, when you look at the current FPMT, the rank of FPMT lamas, Lama Zopa Rinpoche is not one of the high lamas in the Gelugpa system, in terms of historical reasons, or not historical reasons, historical narratives. It's not one of those like Lingam Rinpoche, Chijo Rinpoche, this Rinpoche. It comes from a really small house.
That's right.
It's associated with not even in central Tibet. It's at the very kind of outskirts of the Tibetan world. It's like Tsum, the edge of Nepal. But still, when you look at actually probably who is the most influential Tibetan Lama at the present, it's hard to find someone that is more influential than Lama Zopa Rinpoche in terms of the scope of activities.
That when His Holiness wants something done.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, well, I mean, his most recently, what he gave, FPMT made 1,000 statues and gave them to his. Which statues were they? They were some kind.
Lama Zopa.
Yeah.
I mean, like significant Lama Zopa statues. They weren't little ones. They were significant, and we gave them to His Holiness. Like, it's just, and those dedication prayers. I mean, I just love those. It's not just all sentient things, but then he goes into detail for a good half hour.
Yeah.
I've heard him do it, in the endless detail on who sentient things are that we are praying for them.
It's doing hips, as they say in
No stone
Australia.
unturned. No stone is ever left unturned. He is totally bountifully bearing for us all.
Yeah. I mean, the comment that I made yesterday was just kind of, the language is so foreign. Like, what does it mean, a bountiful bearer of all? Yeah. When you think about it in details, you can. I think that you can think about it, but just kind of to begin with, I had to read through that like hundreds of times to just understand how those words connect together. Yeah. Bountiful bearer of all. All right. Okay. Let's do one of the secondary offenses, or let's learn them, not do them.
No, that's not.
So I think that we've covered 11. Let's look at number 12. If you willingly embrace any of the 5 wrong livelihoods and do not apply their antidote, it is a secondary offense of voluntarily accepting wrong livelihood. The 5 wrong livelihoods are to seek and acquire through pretension, flattery, intimation, coercion. Do you say coercion or cohesion? Coercion. And giving. All right, so the 5 wrong livelihoods. pretension, the first one is can also be called hypocrisy, right? So it's like, you could say that to be hypocritical in the way that we want to get something from another person is to behave like, for example, at least for us as monastics, we can behave as if we're really kind of serene and pacified and tamed and kind of, put up this show as if we're doing really good in order to impress sponsors, then come back home, unbutton our belt and kind of behave in a reckless way. That would be being hypocritical.
I think Angela referred to that this morning in a slight way. It's not just wearing the robes, but it's what's happening in your mind.
Yeah.
It's not just what you present.
Yeah. I think that, with those 5 wrong livelihoods, when we think of what's the underlying attitude of a wrong livelihood, it is attachment to gain and honor, I would say, with most of them, right? Attachment to gain and honor, and you're trying to get something from another person for gain and honor. So we call it the 5 wrong livelihood, although it's not necessarily the case that those are things that are absolutely necessary for your livelihood. You might also want to have, for example, a good reputation to make a good name for yourself. You might then get services in lieu or in return for having a good name, good reputation. So I think that it includes those things, which it is motivated by an attachment to gain and honor, with an emphasis on material things, but probably you can link in some other stuff into what would be considered to be a hypocritical attitude that would also be, I guess, against our training as bodhisattvas.
Well, I think also hypocritical is the one where you criticize someone else and you're actually what you do, or how you behave, and you're criticizing someone else. You say that's.
Yeah, it's like, sometimes we try to set ourselves up by criticizing someone else. It's more like if you criticize someone else, then you appear to be actually doing better than them. So if you do the same thing, it's hypocritical. Or you don't have to do the same thing, but sometimes, when I think of, sometimes when I have issues with people, I tend to kind of then in my mind tend to get critical. I don't like a particular attitude that they have, so my mind blocks away, all the other positive things that they do, which are my failings. It's like maybe they're doing bad in that area, but I'm doing badly in other areas. So my mind tends to be a bit righteous. They're bad because of those faults, but I have no faults whatsoever. So that's, I think, also in some sense a hypocritical approach. I don't know if you could link it directly into the 5 wrong livelihoods, because it's not always about getting something that I want, but it is, I think, the basis for the 5 wrong livelihoods is an attachment to gain and honor. And one way of going about it is being hypocritical. So that's the first one. Kate is saying, this reminds me that status is something that is rewarded on multiple levels in samsara. Yeah, correct, Kate. So then, So the next wrong livelihood is intimation or hinting. So you might be, sorry? Okay, well, let's see. I think that maybe the order that I have in my notes are different. Let's see. So flattery, all right, flattery. Yeah, kind of you become really polite and flatter people for the good qualities, also expecting to be rewarded. So again, you can be nice to someone, you can speak about the good qualities, and it is part of our mind training to praise the qualities of others and not to criticize them. But then if the motivation for praising someone else's qualities, attachment to gain and honor for yourself, you want to get something, that's flattery. That's probably the demarcation between praising someone's quality as a virtuous thing or flattery.
Or endearing yourself.
Yeah.
As opposed to creating a harmonious environment.
Yeah.
You're patting on what you're telling somebody is strength of things. I really like the way you
but
Yeah.
it's your motivation.
Yes, that's right. And
Yeah.
you're saying that because you want to.
They'll give you something.
No. But I'm saying
I think it is.
it's not a wrong livelihood when you do it with the motivation of wanting to create harmony.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Mm.
So you can lack.
Yeah. I mean, also kind of, I think that when you look at the role of spiritual teachers, you know, sometimes you have, you know, like Geshe Tsultrim sometimes highlights people's good qualities. You know, you said that, you know, the person has done such and such, and that's an excellent thing. You know, so I think that that's a way of inspiring others, or speaking about highlighting somebody else's good qualities, and you know, it's not regarded as flattery. It's like wanting to get something from that person.
But like asking extensive questions.
It's okay.
It's a way of also, I think, drawing people in, and
Yeah.
hooking people in.
Yeah,
That's
that's a like motivation.
It's a good motivation.
All right, so flattery was the second type of wrong livelihood. The third one is intimation or hinting. So, for example, you know, if I say that, you know, you're such a generous person. You know, I know that you're so generous with Sangha people. You know, you're such an excellent benefactor, and you know that you're going to get so much merit if you're going to make donations to the Sangha, and ... I'm one of the Sangha. You know, so you know that way of intimation or hinting, trying to get something with hinting, not with that way of hinting, is a wrong livelihood.
But you know, I mean, we have people like, you know, with Wisdom Archive. He's always doing it. He's
Who?
always with Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive. She's always asking people for money to provide for the Dharma. So you know, he's definitely making hitting. But that's with the motivation.
That's not hinting. That's direct asking.
No, but it's more.
Right, yeah.
Well, it has to be kind of attachment to gain and honor for personal,
It's more for personal gain.
yeah, for personal
And
gain.
it's a sneaky mind. That's not
Yeah.
a sneaky mind.
No.
So,
Yeah.
if we want to keep
Yeah.
the Dharma going, we've got to support it.
I mean, I guess that you can look at certain areas that are a little bit murky. You can say that, for example, if Chambrezik Institute was multi-million-dollar operation, I would have been able to negotiate my salary and be like on a 6-digit salary every year, let's say. No, so I can say that I can intimate or hint to someone that is really rich that is going to be good for them if they benefit the organization. You know, I'm like a secondary beneficiary of that thing. You know, so still they might be beneficial for the organization, but if I'm doing this in order to get a personal benefit, that's considered to be flattery. Yeah. If it's for the benefit of the organization, if it's for the benefit of the Dharma, then that's not considered to be a wrong livelihood. So again, I think that kind of, when we think about it in general, what would be an attitude that is not involved with self-cherishing, that is not involved with seeking gain and honor, that's probably going to be all right. But if we act based on self-cherishing and pursuing gain and honor, it is likely that it's going to link up with one of those 5 wrong livelihoods if we try to get something. Then, sorry? All right. It's okay. You're being pardoned. Then we have coercion. Yeah, to force someone to take something by force, or I mean by force, kind of to put them in a uncomfortable spot. Give it to me, or you know, let's say that you know, or like a shaming campaign. You know, it's like, you know, if they don't give you something, you kind of create a situation that is uncomfortable for them in public. You know, we might not take it by force, but still you're creating a situation where they're not giving you something because they want to, but because you've created some pressure.
Yes. So is this the 4th one?
Yeah, the 4th one.
Which is what?
Coercion.
Force.
Shame on you. Then the last one is Last one is bribery. It has different ways of expressing it in Tibetan because it's like I think that there's no like clear-cut word in Tibetan that is translated as bribery. So here it says giving. Sometimes you hear kind of another translation is seeking gain from gain. You know, so in bribery, kind of you put in small money into something in order to get a bigger result, right? So it's like you promise someone a particular thing in order for you to be benefited by that. Yeah, Olympics committee, big bribes. Yeah, yeah. World Cup also very corrupt. The world, yeah.
It's not just a case of
I wonder if there are cases where, now I called it bribery, but now I'm thinking about it out loud. Are there things that, you know, in seeking gain from gain, you invest in something, or you put some effort, not necessarily. No, I think that kind of when you exploit someone, it needs to be kind of some exploitation, corporate political donations.
Who's that?
I don't know. Maybe it's from the Zoom headquarters. No, I think that kind of, yeah.
Maybe they're asking for something. We're not giving.
But we have a question. Houston, we have a question.
What if my intention as an outcome where bribe maybe produce something that benefit possible?
Yeah, what if bribe produces something that people prosper from? I think that kind of
I think the Olympics was a classic example of that. A lot of people prospered from it, you could say, but they still got caught.
I think that, you know, here we look at so this whole topic comes up as part of what we need to avoid when we take upon ourselves the Bodhisattva vow. So when we take upon ourselves the Bodhisattva vow, we are training in a mind that is solely invested in the welfare of others and is completely reducing to the point of completely eliminating a self-cherishing attitude. So there are certain situations where you have to kind of choose what will be the correct path of action. So the correct path of action would be maximum benefit for sentient beings. Not for you, but for sentient beings. That would be kind of like the general way of looking at what would be the good thing to do. Now, there are certain situations where you could be benefited and other sentient beings might be benefited. Or that there are two paths of actions that you can choose. One of them is that there is some damage or negative action that is done, but still on the long term, it brings about greater benefits, right? So you always have to kind of balance things out. So let's say that there is an action that is considered to be an illegal action, morally a bit corrupt, you have to bribe someone, but still it brings about a great benefit to others. Like, for example, in certain situations, you know, let's say that someone, you know, you find yourself in a dodgy country, someone is being imprisoned, they're unjustly. And if you you can bribe someone to get the person out of a death sentence or whatever. Now, you're going to give bribery, and you can say that by participating in bribery, you are participating in the system, but you can save someone else's life. You know? So then you have to really decide which is the best course of action. And when you do that, then again, when you think about it in the big picture of the Bodhisattva ideal, which is maximum benefit for sentient beings and not being motivated by a self-cherishing attitude, then let's say that you do it kind of a negative action, but it's to save another person. It's not for your own personal gain, but it is for the benefit of others. So I think that in that sense, that would be an okay path of action.
There's violence and killing, roughly in scale with bribery?
So we actually, so now we're looking at a list of secondary offenses. So one of the secondary offenses that we've covered, I think that the one that came before was not doing enough for the sake of others and not acting on the basis of compassion. So it says that when you have a situation where you should actually perform one of the 7 actions of body and speech, which means that you have to kill, steal, get involved with sexual inappropriate behavior, lie, speak harshly, and so forth, where in general we shouldn't do that. But there are particular cases where if you did that, you would be protecting others or you'd be benefiting others, and you choose not to do it, that's a secondary offense. Now, so if you kind of, yeah. So
I guess it's some of it, like, I don't know whether they take Bodhisattva vows or not, but police officers who are in a situation where to save a whole lot of other people, that they kill someone, but it's to save someone else, and that's acceptable.
Yeah.
But whether they take Bodhisattva vows or not.
I think that we can always look at situations in general.
Yeah.
You know, kind of, it's hard to come up with really specific and pertinent events in our life. But I think that when you look at the whole Bodhisattva ideal in general, the thing is that when you're training the deeds of Bodhisattvas, you're training in developing the consummate altruistic intention to the point in which if it comes at your own personal suffering, you would still willingly do that if it's done for the sake of others. Mm-hmm. So when we perform negative actions, we're creating causes for our own suffering. So if there's a situation where there is a negative action that could be done in order to protect the life of many other sentient beings, but we don't do that because we think, I don't want to do that because it will create suffering and problems for me, then this type of attitude is an attitude of self-cherishing, which under the framework of working as a bodhisattva, training as a bodhisattva, we should avoid that. So in those cases where you could benefit a great number of beings or accomplish a great purpose, and still there are some negative result that you would get for yourself, then as a bodhisattva, if you refrain from that, that would be not acting based on compassion or not doing enough for the sake of others.
Sorry, seemingly reductive. I was chatting with another Geshe a little while ago, and he said, absolutely never is there a time to kill. So you said that you were having a conversation with Geshe before, said absolutely never kill. So, you know, I think that here in this particular section that we've covered, I think that even it came up in maybe the commentary of Shantideva's text, which is a story about this captain on a boat.
Jackie, can I please tell that story correctly? Because I read it the other day and I can now. So this is how the story goes, is that there was a whole lot of rich merchants that after a successful business and everything like that, they were on a boat and they were all on their way back to the respective lands. And this clairvoyant, enlightened person could see that there was this evil man on the ship that wanted to kill all these merchants because he wanted to rob them and take all their success away from them. And so he could see that this was not going to be beneficial for, particularly the man that was going to kill all these people, or for many other people that were going to benefit from these merchants going back to their respective places. So this clairvoyant, enlightened person killed him, and he was prepared to take on the negative karma for the greater benefit. So in that case, it is said that even though he certainly performed a non-virtue, that he didn't create the cause to go down to the hell road. And it's only through having an enlightened mind, a clairvoyant mind, which he did, can you actually behave in unskillful ways, such as killing skillfully. But, you know, we certainly couldn't do. We certainly couldn't have that level of clairvoyance. But that's how the story went out here. I just read it a couple of days ago. I thought I must help you get that story straight.
Thank you. So anyway, in general, it is a negative action, particularly when you look at what bodhisattvas are training at. Then if there's certain point in time where we have to make a decision, sometimes we would make a decision to do something that in general is prohibited. But that's in general. I think that for most of us, we are likely not to experience those events in our life where we have to kill someone in order to save many others. But
not necessarily killing, but then there was the doco just the other day on Italy in the COVID period where there were a lot of people in hospital and they had to choose whether you gave the incubator to the older person or the younger person. So it wasn't about killing them, but they knew they were going to die as a result.
Yeah.
Difficult situations.
All right, let's just make sure that we just go over some of the stuff that we've covered with Geshe-la today. So thought of doing it by looking at the outline so that we don't lose the backbone of chapter number 4. So I think that yesterday we spoke about cultivating conscientiousness with respect to bodhicitta. And we spoke about it in the Tute. Let's look at cultivating conscientiousness with respect to the training, remembering that there are 3 main points. Being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings or negative actions, which we finished. I think that we finished this section today, and we started the second point, which is being conscientious about cultivating virtue. We actually finished that section as well, right? And then we started the next one, which is being conscientious about abandoning the afflictions. So, as I said, when you look at how Shantideva presents it, the first 2 points is, the 2 out of the 3 points speak about abandoning wrongdoings and then abandoning the afflictions. So looking at it from the negative side, but also when he speaks of being conscientious about cultivating virtue, it doesn't necessarily say what virtue we need to cultivate. It says that if you don't do that, you end up in a miserable state of existence. So looking at what Lama Tsongkhapa says in Lama Rinpoche, Lama Tsongkhapa actually says what needs to be done in order to know what needs to be done, what kind of virtue you need to do, you need to cultivate in order to maintain bodhicitta in this life and in future lifetimes.
Isn't this all in the context of cultivating bodhicitta though? So the virtue maintaining bodhicitta,
I didn't get the beginning of your question, sorry. Is it?
So this is all in the context of maintaining bodhicitta.
Yeah.
The virtue would be maintaining.
Yeah, the virtue would be maintaining bodhicitta. But Lama Tsongkhapa gives, I mean, I agree with you, but Lama Tsongkhapa gives, I think, a useful advice about how do you cultivate that virtue, in the sense of, at least for me, it's kind of more practical. It's like, okay, if I need to cultivate a virtue of bodhicitta, then he says, well, do it 6 times a day. I mean, we know that we need to do it 6 times a day in the 6-session Guru Yoga, but still kind of, for me, it's like speaking about how you do it on a practical level. It's more for dull people like me, it's more helpful. Anyway, so let's look at let's look at being conscientious about abandoning wrongdoings, and try to maybe come up with a summary of the section and just looking at the outline and maybe briefly reminding ourselves of the verses. So yesterday in the Tute, we spoke about if negativities and downfalls are not abandoned, you must continue to take rebirth in the lower realms. That's quite clear.
I always wonder, I'm just reading here Lama Tsongkhapa, and it is, because I find when this part on conscientiousness by Shantideva, like it's really pushing the point by behaving badly. It has the potential of throwing you into the lower realms, and once you're in the lower realms, it's going to take you forever to get out. It's really, to me, it seems extreme. As an ordained person, who is trying to, who's trying their best, who marvelously could do something on a bad hair day or you know what I mean.
Yeah.
On a hair day.
Yeah.
Hair day. I have them regular. As opposed to Lama Sankara, like he's just saying, the second benefit of being fully endowed with the protective merit is as follows. That secret modes of knowledge modules that can cure epidemics, injuries, and infections that are not effective in the hands of living beings become effective when someone with a stable generation of spirit of enlightenment uses them. So in some ways, I feel that it's almost going to the other extreme. Like if you maintain it really well, you're going to then be a cure of epidemics and like, I feel as though they're both exaggerated.
Well, actually, an interesting thing with, I think with studying Shantideva's Guide to Bodhisattva Way of Life, it's a really inspiring text, and it provides us with really good center for our practice in how to cultivate altruism. But it's such a high-level practice that it's almost like we want to do it, but it's not. We're not at that level yet. So we get a lot of inspiration, but still, in some sense, you can say that it's. We're yet to get to the point where we actually start to put it into practice. Like, for example, and one of the things is that it seems that it'd be easier for us to train in loving kindness than to guard the monastic vow, for example. It'd be easier to train in bodhicitta than guarding the monastic vow. But actually, when you look at how it is presented, not only here, but also in other scriptures, it's much harder to guard the bodhisattva vow than to guard the monastic vow. So it says, one of the verses that we've covered today said that if we abandon bodhicitta, right? So if we relinquish bodhicitta, it is way more serious than breaking your ordination vow. So sometimes we don't really get it because of the language. It's kind of, it says that becomes like a really serious cardinal sin. It doesn't really specify that. But when you look at the language itself, it refers to performing those actions that are more graver than a defeat in relation to your vow, which means losing your ordination vow. So are we, have we reached that point in our practice where we consider the bodhisattva vow to be more difficult to keep than the ordination vow, to be more serious? Probably not, in a sense that we think that with the bodhisattva vow, it's quite easy. I can take it every day. So even if I break it, even if I transgress the bodhisattva vow, I can retake it again and can restore it. So, we're not as careful with, at least I can speak on a personal level. We're not as careful with the bodhisattva vow as we are with the ordination vow, but it's more serious. So you said that it sounds like going to an extreme, but I think that maybe it is like that, but we don't see it like that.
But I think it's part of that total hiddenness of karma, Socrates. Well, it's totally subtle. We get it at a very gross level, but the Socrates are how it works. Because you read that about like Tantam Galpol and so forth. He's the only one through those prayers to overcome famine, to overcome war, to overcome epidemic. Yes.
Yeah.
So he was seen to be a Buddha, so you have a moment that you have to really affect that. Yeah.
I mean,
I would also think you'd also have to have huge negativity to be thrown down into the hellholes.
I mean, to be honest, kind of there are certain descriptions that you find in scripture which I find it difficult to relate to. Like, for example, you mentioned that if you develop the mind of enlightenment, you'd be able to cure epidemics and blah, blah, blah. I mean, His Holiness the Lama and Lama Sopa Rinpoche, I mean, do they go around and cure epidemics? I don't know, but it doesn't seem like overtly that they have cured COVID-19.
No, but they're doing pretty extreme practices.
Yeah, they're doing extreme practices, but I think that you have to kind of probably understand it in a particular way. We have those kind of signs that we put sometimes on top of doors. Whoever goes under this sign purifies. I mean, does it work literally? can you take it literally?
Well,
Probably
that's
not.
because you don't know how much you've got to feel.
I don't know.
Because
Kind of, I never take those things literally.
it also says that the eons of merit that you stuff up or whatever, or that you accumulate, it's eons worth of merit. So it's not like a literal time span that's fixed. It's like how long it would take to accumulate that in another way.
Well, I guess that there is a certain reason why it was stated like that, and people have different interpretations. My way of looking at that is just, I find it hard to take it literally. It still serves a certain purpose. It serves a certain purpose. For someone that does take it literally, it brings about an immense benefit. So I don't underestimate that. I don't undermine it. But for me, I find other ways to look at it, and still not kind of to become dismissive of it. I try. Kate says also different teachers give different ideas about the consequences and antidotes for negative actions. Is it because different teachings speak more clearly to our mind stream? Well, I think that also you have different teachers that have their own dispositions. You have, I think that Geshe Jamyang and Geshe Tashtsering, that were student and teacher, had different dispositions, though they didn't agree with each other on certain points. So one gave teaching one way, the other gave teaching in another way, and both of those ways were valid from their point of view. And I think that also when you listen to those teachings, you can also take on board those two advice and work it out how actually it works even for you in certain situations, not necessarily in a contradictory level, but it can be supplementary or complementary.
It's like this one who says have the same teachings, but different teachings with different teachers with different students.
Yeah.
Many times. So
Yeah, study many, study with many, study, for a long time.
different.
All right, let's go back to the outline. So negativities and downfalls are not abandoned. You will continue to take rebirth in the lower realms. Then it says Buddhas and their children, Bodhisattvas, act with equanimity. We spoke about it yesterday. We said that kind of even though Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have love and compassion to all, still we from our side need to make the effort to be cared for by a Buddha or Bodhisattva, because if we think that it's only for them to do the work and we don't need to do anything about it, we'll still, as it says, Buddhas, will still remain where we are in our state, and nothing will improve. Verse 13. So although countless Buddhas have passed by to benefit all sentient beings, yet I was not an object of their care because of my own misdeeds. So then, then there's the section of difficulty of obtaining human life of pleasure and endowments. We've covered that before. So we've spoke yesterday of if bodhicitta deteriorates, it becomes difficult to obtain freedoms or leisures and endowments that possess the four wills. Those external conditions, conducive place to practice, conducive teachers, and so forth. Even though they've been obtained, you should make effort because they quickly perish. So, I'm free from sickness like the day, fed and free from harm, but life is momentary and deceptive. The body is like an object on loan, but for a lover. All right. Then we have the fourth point. There is no opportunity to practice virtue if one has taken rebirth in the lower realms. With such behavior of mine, I will not obtain even a human body. If this human body is not attained, there will be solid negativity and no virtue. So in complementing our contemplation of death and impermanence and freedoms and opportunities, then even if we lose this body that we have now with freedoms and opportunities and end up in a miserable state of existence, you might be thinking that I will exhaust this karma. And again, I'll be born as negative karma will run its course. I'll be free from that so that I can once again be born in a positive state. So here Shantideva says that actually, if you end up in a miserable state in itself, you will still continue to create negativities and there will be more suffering for you in the future. It reminds me that, sometimes when you have conversations with people about, for example, sickness, debilitating sickness, and maintaining a positive frame of mind. Now, sometimes the advice that is given is that if you experience suffering now, you're burning out karma, so that you won't have to experience that again. So it's a good way to look at suffering that you experience now, or also sufferings that are experienced in other states of existence. But if you don't develop a positive mind with respect to that, if you become anxious, angry, short-tempered, and so forth, then you'll be creating more negativities. It's like, it reminds me that sometimes when we speak about, for example, a dying person, there could be non-Buddhist or dying animal or whatever, and kind of that argument that is being presented, that at least they're burning off this karma and they won't have to experience suffering again in the future. Well, I mean, if the time is not spent wisely in that state, if there's still negative actions that are accumulated in that state, it's still kind of, one still accumulates negative karma on that account. So, we also need to maybe make effort in creating conducive conditions for ourselves or for someone else going through that state to maintain a positive frame of mind.
I was going to say, because you might be burning off that specific fruition of a specific karma.
Yeah.
Like, as you're saying, but you're creating more and more.
But also there is remembering that when we create an action, there are different types of result to that action. So there is the ripening result, which is the type of breath that you take. There is an environmental result, which is the environment that you experience. And there is the result similar to the cause that you experience. So you might be, for example, purifying, you have a painful experience. You might be purifying one aspect of that karma through having that painful experience, but it doesn't mean that the other aspects are being purified. So you might still experience on that basis a difficult environment. You might still take a miserable rebirth on the basis of that action, if only one aspect is purified and not all the other aspects.
Can anybody remember the question that we wanted to ask Geshe-la yesterday? Would be nice to ask him a question.
Can't remember. All right, so this point says that there's no opportunity to practice virtue if you're born in the lower realms. That's pretty grim, right? Think of being born with really dull faculties, like as a dog or a cat, or some people want to be born as dolphins.
Capacity more, like the capacities for compassion are greater than single cell mosquito.
But still, kind of, it's hard to think of being totally positive as an animal, or guarding pure ethical discipline to begin with. Then it is extremely difficult to be liberated from the lower realms if you have taken rebirth there. I mean, particularly considering that to be led from one lifetime to the next, and to be born in a pleasant state of existence, you need to have a virtuous state of mind, being on the verge of death, right? So we said that there's such brief moment being on the verge of death where you need to have a virtuous state of mind to be born in a good state of rebirth in your next lifetime. So if you are born in a miserable state of existence, it seems that it might happen by chance. It's like, if you get lucky, will happen, but it is in all likelihood, it would be very difficult. Lama Tsongkhapa says, as far as I remember in the Lamrim Chamo, when he speaks about freedoms and opportunities and how difficult it is to find freedoms and opportunities, it says that to go from a happy rebirth to a miserable rebirth, it's like the number of grains in the Ganges. But the number of sentient beings that go from a miserable rebirth to a pleasant rebirth are so few. I can't remember the analogy that he used. Do you remember that? Yeah, the speck of.
I was thinking of the rice at one, where the rice, and you've got the noodle and the ability of the rice to stick
Yeah, that's one of the analogies. But I think that it's like, yeah,
Right, sticking to, I mean,
Well,
the
it's
same
like
sand,
sand.
second sand.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yes, you can remember what the question
No,
was.
I don't remember, but it was something to do with the dull or sharp faculty. When you
Oh,
said
yeah.
that, it was something.
it was about yeah. We can maybe ask Geshe to clarify or to speak a little bit about dull faculties and sharp faculties and how you become one and how. Yeah. Someone remember it and ask Geshe tomorrow in his class. And then the last one is the reason it is difficult to obtain leisures and endowments. The reason here, actually in our text, is given the analogy of that story of turtle and the yolk. So it's not an actual reason. It's more like it's an analogy.
It's showing you the rarity of it, but it's not
Yeah.
not reason.
Yeah.
Turtle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the next is being conscientious about cultivating virtue. So it says here when you look at that in general, just at the outline without looking at the verses, it says, if negativity is accumulating in the past are limitless, it would be reasonable to make effort in abandoning them. So you should purify negativities, or you should abandon them. One of the comments that was made in the commentary was that therefore you should rely upon the 4 powers of the antidote. Now, one of the 4 powers of the antidote is the power of thorough application of the antidote, where I think that this is where it's more closely linked with virtue. So you use something virtuous in order to purify a certain negativity that you've done before, right? So you need to practice virtue within the framework of the 4 powers, so that as negativity is accumulated in the past are limitless, you need to make effort in abandoning them. Then karma that leads one to take rebirth in the lower realms is not exhausted merely by experiencing suffering in the lower realms. So we spoke about it just now. Then the reason why it would be reasonable to make effort in applying the antidotes to negativity. One deceives oneself if one does not make effort in virtue when you have freedoms and opportunities, that's clear. One will experience suffering in this life. The suffering in this life refers to the suffering of regret. So verse 24 says, if having understood this out of confusion, I'm indolent afterwards, when it is time to die, tremendous grief will rear its head, right? So it is particularly the suffering in this life is referring to the suffering of regret when you understand that you have wasted your life without making the most out of it. And it is very likely that you will then soon proceed to a miserable rebirth. So you haven't made preparations while you could have made those preparations. So one will be tormented with the suffering of the lower realms in the future. Verse 25, if my body burns for a long time in the fires of hell, which are difficult to bear, inevitably my mind will be tormented by the blazing fires of unbearable remorse. Right? So it's again looking at how we cultivate virtue from the point of view that if you don't do that, the result would be grim.
But I think we also need to bear in mind too that even if we do that in this life, now, you know, for the next week or whatever, doesn't mean that we're going to be happy now, right? I mean, it might help. It might help our current situation, but it's not guaranteed. That just by behaving in a virtuous way for a while doesn't mean that, you know, you're then going to have happiness.
I think I probably kind of know the word happiness is kind of
Overrated.
well, it's a good word. To say happiness is overrated, it kind of is a bit dangerous. But I think that sometimes we look at it as like black or white. You know, do I have happiness or do I have suffering? I think that sometimes you can look at it as like, am I actually doing better than before? You know, it was actually really bad before, and it's still bad now. But am I able to take on suffering and at least get another perspective? You know, it's like
What you're saying is it's not stable. So
I mean, it's sometimes creating virtue, like in the form of a luna, is you know, suffering.
but you feel good afterwards because you feel so good.
What you do.
and you get excellent breakfast.
And you get a great breakfast.
I agree with that. That's still, you know, I think it's not always the fix that it can be presented as.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. You know, I think, oh, I've done all of this. I'm doing these water bowls. I'm trying to do this and that, and I'm still bloody miserable. I still have my bad days. You know, then I have to remember that it's the big picture. I've got to keep in mind the big picture. It isn't necessarily the next day.
Well, it's not only keeping the big picture. I think that also the instructions that we get here, but also particularly in the chapter on patience, is instructions on how to deal with difficulties and problems. So now we are creating virtues now, but we also have to look at difficult situations and turn them into conditions that are conducive for the path. And one of them is through practicing patience.
Yes.
So yeah, you know, we practice virtue, but just by the mere fact that we were born as human beings, we're still subject to birth, sickness, aging, and death. You know, so if we don't experience suffering now, it is guaranteed that it will come in the future. You know, it is absolutely guaranteed, unless kind of you have a swift death where the suffering is kind of really short term. But it is very likely that if we have still quite a few years to come, there will be a lot of pain and suffering for us. So, you know, yeah, we practice virtue now, but there will be still suffering because I have a body of suffering, but I can still develop my mind and particularly develop those tools of transforming problems. Maybe I should do your DB course, Transforming Problems.
Just finished, you missed it.
Just finished. Well, luckily there are recordings on YouTube. Yeah. Okay, let's finish here for today. Yeah, dedicated merit.
Oh, I just remembered.
May I quickly become Guru, Lord Buddha, and lead each and every sentient being to his enlightened realm because of his merit. May the supreme jewel Bodhisattva, which has not arisen, rise and grow, and may that which has arisen never diminish, but increase more and more. In this land encircled by snowy mountains, yeah. Happiness and good, all powerful and rising hands and God. So please remember this samsara. Here sometimes secure small way, serves the bountiful powerful, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjana's victorious doctrine, massively accomplishes magnificent praise, honor, and defeat, protection of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long.
Thank you, Carson.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Never does.
Thanks, Ryan.
Is it not?